Welcome, Drink with James, episode 52. I promised you guys a handsome man. I fucking delivered on it. We got Luke Ditella here. As usual, I don't do these intros until I'm fully drunk, so we actually have had a 45-minute conversation. But Luke, tell us a little bit about, for the people out there that don't know you, give me the elevator pitch.
I grew up in South Jersey as a surfer. I started competing professionally when I was 14 and was a professional surfer for a pretty long time. And then I met my now fiance. Was walking down the street in New York City, met a casting agent for modeling and acting, and she created this whole game plan for me. And then Instagram got thrown into it, and Instagram kind of gave me a whole other avenue that I didn't think was going to exist, you know, and a great audience and great followers and a great way for me to connect with, you know, a demographic and a group of people globally that I never thought I would have access to. So now currently I don't really know, you know, my title differs on who you're talking to. I own a couple businesses. I do some real estate things. I do some acting. I do some modeling, and I do some Instagramming.
So there's like literally some of the coolest things you can do in your life is probably be a pro surfer, be a male model, and he has done all of that and is also now a very successful influencer. He's at 133,000?
Around 130.
130,000 followers. Yeah, maybe by the time this gets published, he'll be at 133. But I know because we've already had this conversation, he's about to just drop some hot fire on y'all. So stick around.
So,
First of all, we'll start with when do you think your first Instagram post was? What year?
2000. It had to have been 2012. It was just before my mother had passed away. And I remember the post actually. I was in Los Angeles and I posted it from this kind of Midwest band was just playing at this random bar, and I just thought the whole lighting was cool. And so I just took a photo and posted it, and it was after my now fiance was all over me about getting Instagram because I was always really bad at social media. And I just got it kind of just to appease her because she was a photographer. And then, you know, I just did it for fun and started kind of meeting people then because it was still kind of grassroots then. It was small. And I started randomly editing some photos here and there for some people that had good followings. And then, you know, it was just a fun thing. Yeah. Until I started posting my modeling work on there. And then once that happened is kind of when my following started.
So when you started, so back in 2012, you were working as a professional model. What were you doing day to day?
I was a professional surfer.
Okay.
For 13 years, pretty much. So at that point in time, I was kind of in between where I wanted to go with my professional life. I always had very big, dreams and aspirations for myself, and I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And so I was kind of transitioning from surfing. My mother had gotten sick, and then I was walking down the street in Soho and got plucked by a film casting agent that works with, some of the bigger directors. And she kind of helped me, she became an advisor and kind of helped put together a plan for me. And then it just kind of went from there. And Instagram has been a pretty integral part because it exposes you to a whole demographic and swath of brands that might not see you on a regular basis. You know? So,
do you think that being a professional athlete, and specifically being a surfer, has helped you in building this career as an influencer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started to get paid for surfing. I came from a pretty not poor. We were never broke, but we were poor. I didn't have a car when I was growing up, things like that. And my dad worked really, really hard. And I started competing when I was 12, and by the time I was 14, I was getting paid. And it taught me really early on that you need to basically create a very positive image of yourself for people to correlate with. And when I was a kid and I was getting paid and I was young and I didn't really have very much guidance, I was a fucking asshole. I learned the hard way. I got my sponsors cut me. I had all sorts of altercations and things like that. And I think those were really integral in kind of helping me realize how to really, behave and how you should really be when you have eyes on you. And that casting, a positive influence nowadays is really crucial, because there's so many people out there that have eyes on them that, do it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And I think coming from very little, like I did, gives me a lot of appreciation. So I can survive on very little,
right.
So I don't try to fake it at all, I try to be as positive as I can and be as positive influence and help as many people as I can, especially through social media. I respond to every person that writes to me.
Right.
No matter what the questions are, from fucking what boots I'm wearing to
right.
how did I deal with losing both my parents in the span of a year. You know
right.
what I mean? Like I try to really be a positive role model.
One of those questions probably a little harder to answer than the other.
Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, I come from a very odd family. My parents were hippies, and they didn't want funerals. They wanted life celebrations. They were like, we don't want you to cry. We want you to celebrate our lives and throw parties when we pass. So my sister and I were like, yeah, that's what we have to do. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, we took very positive outlooks after they passed away, which seems very kind of cathartic and weird. But I mean, my parents passing was probably the huge turning point in my life for all my careers, like everything I do.
Why is that?
It made me not afraid to fail. It made me just kind of be like, look, like I thought in my head, like if I'm going to do all of this and I really want, I have a lot of aspirations, from owning my own liquor brand to, doing real estate, to my modeling career and acting stuff and influencing things. And it kind of just made me say, like, everything I do, I want to make my parents as proud as possible. So everything I do it for them. So when I do kind of feel like a little discouraged or something, I just think about them and how hard my dad used to ride his bike to work in pouring rain and wind and everything to go make sure the boats were fine in this marina that he worked at. It was like, I think about that and the money that I make for doing what I get to do. And I'm like, it's a fucking joke if I complain or
right.
I don't, push as hard as I can. So it's just kind of made me put my head down and just say fuck it to everything around me and just go for what I want and realize that I can have everything I want. And,
And you think that coupled with it's interesting, you were talking about being a surfer and being young and having some attention on you and having sponsors and being a bit of a shithead, right?
Yeah.
And having that not play out well. I think that this is a problem sometimes in the influencer community of you get these kids that get all this attention thrown on them. They haven't, had a quote unquote real job or a difficult boss before or a humbling life experience. So they do start to think their shit doesn't stink a little bit.
There's a couple, yeah.
And I think that's actually is pretty natural, right? It's pretty natural for you probably when you were on, if you're on the tour and you're surfing around, you're thinking you're pretty fucking cool and and
you're in magazines and stuff and,
right.
and people know who you are, and it's just one of those things. It's like human nature, you don't think, you kind of just react on your gut, and a lot of people's gut is just to kind of get that big head because that's what society has taught us, is that fame and eyes on you is everything, it is kind of funny though, because there are a certain amount of people that I notice, on social media pretty frequently that, make fun of some of their followers about their followers asking them to post them on their feed or asking them, stupid questions or, and they make fun of these people, and it's you need to step back and realize that those people are putting you in the place that you're in. Without them, you wouldn't be able to do these things. So, the questions might seem stupid to you, but these people are asking you these questions, from their heart. And it might be post me on your feed because I want to feel popular or feel cool too, but you don't need to make fun of them. And I think there's a lot of people out there that need to realize that they're kind of being handed a golden ticket with social media nowadays because there's so much money in it. And you can literally go from being a person working at Starbucks to having 200,000 followers on Instagram in a year and be like, holy shit, I'm getting paid $15,000 to post a photo.
Right.
And owning a home. It's but a lot of people just don't have that appreciation for it, I feel like.
Yeah, and how, because we've worked with you quite a bit, and I think that you've always been great to work with. You kind of built a little bit of a following before you started to take it seriously, right?
Yeah.
Did you always from day one, did you have that idea of I'm going to respond to everything people are saying, I'm going to be really kind? Or was it when you started saying, I'm going to treat this like a business, I'm going to get real?
No, it was when I started posting heartfelt things. I grew up writing. The one thing my mom always told me was whenever I felt emotions is to write things down. So I always wrote growing up. And I grew up reading because, you know, I read Hunter Thompson. By the time I was 14, I had read almost everything Hunter wrote. My father was a huge Hunter Thompson fan. And so eventually with social media, when my mother got sick, I started posting about it. I just didn't know what else to do, you know, like I needed another place to vent other than my family and friends. So started writing these things, and I started getting all these comments and people and just this outreach and this enormous amount of support. It made me realize that like I need to support those people as well. So I've gone out of my way since then, which there was a 2-year gap probably between my mom got sick and then I started, you know, Instagram started becoming what it is now, where I still responded to everybody. I still actually remember commenting back to a person, and they added another person that had a good amount of followers and was like, see, you could take a note from him, you know, be appreciative of the people that support you. And I was just like, that's odd, you know, but I mean, I get it. Some people, you know, maybe some people don't want to let people that far into their life. I don't really know, but I definitely try to go out of my way to be as like reciprocating as I can. And
do you know, obviously you're going through an incredibly difficult time in your life, and you had a good amount of vulnerability. And I think that is in a lot of ways to some people quite attractive, right? Like, you know, to have someone you look up to who says, hey, I'm struggling, I'm going through something, I'm flawed as well. And not in a conniving way, but now, you know, you've you know, obviously you haven't moved on, but that life event is you know, been a few years now. Do you still have things that you're super open like that with your followers, that you say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I'm feeling down, or I'm hurt?
I mean, I think now with what I've gone through with both my parents, with my future mother-in-law passing, with myself having the things that have happened to me with, you know, heart failure and car accident and everything, there's very little that I struggle with nowadays that I need to like really talk about, man. I just think about it in my head and I'm like, don't be, you know, you can get through this easily. I'm probably more so the person now that posts something or talks about something and says like, if I can do it, you can do it. Like if I've been through this, you can go through this. You know what I mean? You can go through way more than I did. Like I'd rather try to inspire people than reach out for help nowadays. Cause I mean, aside from bearing some cataclysmic thing in my life, like I've pretty much been through
some shit.
The worst shit in the span of a 5-year span that people go through their entire life.
Right.
You know, so I was kind of like all packed in so much that there's very little now that really does get to me. You know?
Right. But now, I mean, now your life is quite different, right?
Yeah.
Certainly from when you've grown up, and certainly even pro surfer, I'm sure like your life is quite different now. How do you check, that? And how do you like check yourself and be like, cause I'm sure you can look at your life and be like, this is fucking insane, that this is my life in some ways. And I know you're an ambitious guy, so you expect a lot of yourself. But how do you stay down to earth as that following is growing and as your life is changing?
I think what you just said, looking at it and going, this is fucking insane, humbles me, because I'm like, I never, growing up, my father's favorite things in the world were cars and homes. 2 of which he never really owned. Like he had cars, but like he never had the Porsche 356 that he wanted. You know, he never had the house on the ocean that he wanted. He never had those things. And so I think for me, it's just one of those things where I don't know. It's just one of those things where now I get to experience a lot of those things, like driving, you know, Rolls Royces and Aston Martins and Ferraris and stuff like that, and Audi R8s and all those cars, and being able to actually be in a position to own one is like something that I always knew I could do, but I never knew how I'd feel once I got to that point.
Right.
You know, and now that I'm approaching that point, I'm like, I still don't feel any different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a friend of mine at home actually this past weekend was kind of like, you know what's funny is all this shit you've done, you still live like you're broke. And I was like, it's kind of true, except for the fact that I buy Saint Laurent boots all the time. Right. It's like my one vice, like, you know, yeah, I mean, I not much has changed in my own head, and I think that going through what I did with surfing and coming from what I came from and seeing the struggles that my parents went through, I think those are the things that keep me humbled.
Yeah. And I do think that like it's a transition that a lot of influencers go through, right? Because with a big following comes, you know, a lot of money and a lifestyle change and all these things. And how do you be real? And I think that you do a really good job of this, of just not getting to be the person that's expecting that stuff, of expecting that like
I don't
people are gonna, that you're gonna be driving these cars around, expecting that like people are gonna, be wiping your ass and like telling you how great you are. Like that's when you become insufferable, right?
Yeah.
I think you do a great job of being like, oh no, this is still really exciting and cool.
No,
and brands love that too, right? Because you're working with a brand, it's not like, oh God, it's so annoying that I have to like post for this brand. You're like, oh my God, this is so cool. I'm working with this.
And it's funny because essentially with the influencing thing, influencing's been around for hundreds of thousands of years. Social influencing, not social media, but social influencing. Right. And since I was a surfer, it was a very small scale with being a hometown kid and then, doing all the international contests and everything. But I had social influence since I was young, and I think growing up with that has kind of like, I still get excited when I get a box of clothes. I still get super excited when a brand that I like asks me to work with them, and I think that stems from my childhood really, and having wanted things when I was younger that we couldn't have, and I think that now I get them, and I'm still so appreciative for it because it really comes from my mom. My mother and father were two extremely thankful human beings, even though they didn't have very much, and they were the most opening people. They were the first people to open their home to someone, or we had a kid that lived with us for a whole summer because he didn't have a place to live at the beach, in Ocean City, and they fed him, and they didn't have the money to do that, but like they did it, and I think that coming from that, it's really just given me a different kind of perspective on like being able to have these things.
And for the people watching, are there things that you do to let brands know that, to let them know, like, someone sends you that box of clothing, right? Like, what are you doing to make sure brands, because
I always try to leave. So the one thing that my mother told me when I was younger was, everyone that you work with, try to make sure that you leave with them being your friend. And I always think about that. So when I work with a brand, like a lot of these brands are so moving so quickly that they don't really have time to become friends with the people that they're working with. They're on to the next, and this world is such a fast turnaround. You see people work with a different brand every single day. So it's very hard to kind of like forge a real-time relationship. But I do my best whenever I'm on set, whether it's modeling or if it's an influencing job or whatever it is, to really kind of get to know everyone, from the stylist to the assistants to, the people from the brand, and really become friends with these people. I mean, the kid that comes and cuts my hair now is the kid that I met when I did a Lab Series campaign last year. Right. And now he's like the guy that we call to come cut our hair. Yeah. Another guy, Walton, who's a really good friend of ours now, who will be at our wedding. He was a stylist on one of the shoots that I did. You know, like I think that's the way I try to let everyone know that I'm appreciative, is really by becoming their friend.
Right. And I can attest to that. I mean, we were sitting at a restaurant with the brand together at midnight. We closed the place down. I had to be like, I think we need to leave. They're closing this place. But what was interesting is that I think you went out to drinks with a client and with someone from my team. Yeah. And then you had something else you had to do. Yeah. And then you came back. Yeah. And that was the step that I was surprised. I hadn't met you yet. I had no idea who you were. I was surprised at that because it felt like you put your time in. Yeah. You had this other event to go to, and you wouldn't come back to dinner after you had been to another event unless it was like, oh yeah, we're cool. You had done your thing that you needed to do, which was you got this big client, you got drinks, everyone's excited, blah blah blah. But you came back, and I think that was for me, sitting in knowing a lot of influencers and being in this situation a lot, was surprising in a good way of oh wow, you actually want to get to know these people and want them to work with you.
I pride myself in working with brands that I identify with. I always try to be very real, especially in this day when there's so many brands that have budgets that essentially can get anybody that they want. And the brands that I've always worked with through my surfing career up until doing this, or brands that I've modeled for, every single brand is a brand that I would buy their product. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so for me, I like to get to know the people behind the brands as much as I like to know the brand, because they're the reason that the brand's doing what it's doing. Mm-hmm. And I like to forge those relationships and those friendships, because those are the things that are going to last a lifetime. And when social media has its next big platform and things move on, I'll still know those people and be friends with those people and still be able to, go to dinner with them and things like that. And I've always been a really big person on human connection. So it's just kind of, in my nature to do that. I do that frequently. I always push to have dinners, once the business talk's done. I'm always like, let's go get drinks and like get to know each other instead of just talk about how we're going to, do business together,
And that's super interesting because I think, for people that's not their nature.
Yeah.
And again, like this is just who you are. So it's probably weird for you to be like, this is advice I'd give. Is that it? Like close a deal, try and get them to like get out of that business situation into like a social friend situation?
I mean, I don't think that there's anything wrong with not having that asset to your personality. Some people aren't built like that, but they're still really effective as a marketing tool, and they get the job done well. I think just for me, that's what works for me. Because the peace of mind for me is being able to work with brands where I identify with the people that work with the brand, and I identify with the brand.
Right.
So for me, that's a major step in getting to know everybody and having them comfortable. And I want them to know as well, and this is a big reason that I do that is, which I've realized after the fact, is that I want them to be able to tell me if whatever I'm doing isn't what they want. Because some people don't want to, push back because they think, it could cause a conflict or whatever. And my biggest thing, and same with Melissa, whenever we shoot anything and we send it, like if we want the brand to be like, we don't like this, do it over, we're completely fine with doing that.
Right.
And I think that when you become friends with the people at the brand, you can actually go right to the brand and be like, do you guys want us to change something?
Right.
Rather than, having a person in the middle or a middleman that is kind of like stepping around you having to change the content that they may have wanted. And I think that's proven really effective for us because we've been able to really work with the brand and give the brands exactly what they want.
And you guys do some pretty creative, interesting stuff. Are you doing pre-shoot? Are you pitching concepts? Are you trying to like talk the brand through that stuff? Or do they say, here's what I want, and you say, okay, hold my beer, I'm gonna go like
it varies. Nowadays it seems like a lot of brands know exactly what they want with digital campaigns, but with our wedding, for example, our wedding's become such a multifaceted event that's going to become a yearly event that brands want to see the deck for it. They're like, do you have a pitch deck? And we're like, for our fucking wedding? So we made one, and it's so just so they can see what it's about. And, now it's gotten to the point with her and I where maybe we are in a little bit different of a space than most influencers where we kind of do have that position where we can bring ideas to certain brands that we work with,
right?
And be like, here's what we're doing. Are you guys interested?
Pitching brands can be difficult because, like, I think they have their thing. They're like, oh, well, we're focused on these products in this way, and if your idea fits into that, great. If not, it's tough to fit in. Do you think that, like, the brands that you're able to pitch? So this wedding you're doing is very interesting. You have a lot of brand partners. It doesn't, but it doesn't feel gross. It feels like this fun, creative project that everyone's working on. Were those the brands? Like, were they your friends beforehand? Like, were those past relationships that you grew so they trusted you when you said, hey, I've got this crazy idea?
It wasn't even, these are brands that, again, we were brought into and became friends with. And now, I'm not going to list the brands, but the brands that are involved in the wedding, I mean, I'm the global marketing directors, I text them now,
right.
and the CEO of one of the brands, I text them, and because we're friends, and it's like, I get a straight answer, and I'm not afraid of being shot down, so it kind of like, it makes it a little bit easier, but I think when I've become friends with the brand and the brand has come to us, they know that what we're creating is what they want, so when we have an idea, it kind of almost already kind of fits the brand because we work with brands that we fit into. So with the wedding, I think we work with, luckily, very thankfully, I work with a lot of luxury brands, and our wedding is very, very high end. I mean, it's a Gatsby themed kind of like, if Alexander McQueen styled a wedding for Jay Gatsby and Tim Burton provided the details. It's pretty much what our wedding is.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And a lot of luxury brands, they like that because nowadays, who's one of the most successful like influential men on the planet is David Beckham, right? And he's this very like gentlemanly guy, but he has an edge because he's tattooed and he's got like the shaved sides of his head, and I think a lot of brands now realize that demographic is huge, and a lot of those people are really successful nowadays that buy into that image. And I think when we do something a little bit edgier, a lot of the luxury brands, they kind of like it. It adds a little bit more of like an element that they're not necessarily used to.
Yeah.
So with the wedding, it kind of, we just, we approached a couple of them and they really loved it. So thankfully.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And what if you're an influencer watching this show and you have an idea for a brand, would you say, like, what are the steps to getting that done? Do you think that you need to pitch brands that you have a past relationship with? Do you need the idea fully fleshed out, or should the brand have a place where they can throw their 2 cents in? Like, what's worked for you?
Oh, I think it's integral to let the brand have their voice as well, and give their input. I think our wedding might be a little different because it's a wedding, but with anything else we do, we're always open to any suggestions and collaborative efforts and things like that. And I think that the one thing that's been really crucial for me is finding the right manager, the right management, especially when it comes to approaching these brands, because my manager has like a very long history of working with brands in the industry that he was in, and it just he knows how to word things a little better. But as far as an influencer kind of starting out and doing it themselves, I think it should be a brand that they work with, or just let their content speak for themselves. If you really want to do something, create a pitch deck and find the person to send it to and send it.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst thing that can happen is they can say no, but at least you tried.
Yeah, and how much of that, it was interesting, I wanted to touch on that earlier, you were like, oh, I don't really care if I get shot down.
Yeah.
But I think
I care.
Right. But
I'm not, it's not like I care and it happens and I'm like, holy shit, I lost, everything sucks. Like, it's like, okay, I'll regroup and figure out a way to do it better next time.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to learn from your mistakes and the reasons when people say no, you should wonder why or try to figure out why and correct it.
I think a lot of influencers are often like, ooh, well, I want to work with this brand, but I'm going to wait because I'm not ready, I'm not big enough. Like,
I think nowadays, not to cut you off, but I think nowadays, I think it's become less about the size of someone's audience. Like 2 years ago, if someone had 500,000 followers or 1 million followers and someone else had 100,000, that brand 99% of the time is going with the bigger person, right?
Right.
But nowadays, someone will be like, oh, you have 130, like me, and someone has 1 million, and they're gonna go, this person's content does not breathe our brand, but this one's does. Go with the smaller person, and it, you know what I mean? So I think because there's so many people with huge, followings nowadays, that brands have gone they've gone more away from taking people just for their number and more for their content and their creative. Yeah. Like the creative eye,
Yeah. No, I see that as well. And speaking to that, like obviously Instagram has changed so much over the years.
Yeah.
So are there, you just got verified.
Yeah.
So congratulations there.
Thanks.
That's great.
Yeah.
But on when the algorithm came out, are there things that as Instagram has changed that you've tried to change with your content to try and be more effective there?
Actually, before the algorithm even happened, and I was literally just posting modeling work on my page, and I have a friend of mine, Jonathan Crocker, who's the creative at AG Jeans. Mm-hmm. One day we were having coffee at the Bowery Hotel, and I just kind of asked him because he's really close to Lexa Chung, who most people that would be watching this would know that, she's one of the more successful, digital influencers kind of in history and has her own collections with AG and, does really, really well. And he's been a really good friend of hers for years. And he kind of just said to me, I was like, we were talking about my feed and he's just like, you want to know what's wrong with your Instagram? And I was like, holy shit, someone's actually, yes, tell me, please. Like I need some, constructive criticism, that's great. And he was like, you post yourself too much. Post the shit that makes you you because you've forged this general connection, like this unique connection with your followers, where they're not just liking your photos because of your face, they're actually engaging with you. Mm. And he's like, you need to show them what makes you you. So then I started posting interiors and things that I love, and it kind of made my audience, he even said it, he's like, your audience will grow a little slower, but you're gonna gain the right people. And he was completely right, and that's exactly what happened. And then, the algorithm happened, and I mean, fuck if I understand that thing. It makes no sense to me. It's like, oh, we're creating this algorithm so you can so they can help you see what you want to see, but you follow these people because you want to see what they're posting.
Right, you just want to see it.
Like, yeah, I know I want to see them. I follow them.
Right.
It's a very odd thing. But I have found that now when I post certain things, they might not do as well as, like if I post, I used to post a photo of boots and they would do well. And then I'd post my face and it would do better than the boots. But now it's like I post the boots and it's abysmal. But if I post my face, it's good. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know
Do
where.
you care?
No, I mean, I'm still putting out there what
Right.
makes me me, you know?
But I think that's tough. That's tough as you're so focused on growth, right? And with the algorithm, that like it's tough, I think. And I can speak for me that like I'm not trying to make my living off this, but like it sucks that, you know, I only have 19,500 followers, but if I post something and it gets like 120 likes, I'm like, oh, I liked that.
Yeah.
You know, I liked that photo or that moment or that thing, and it didn't do well. And so you can get into this like this thing of like, I need to post shit that does well, and your face does well, right?
Yeah.
Because you have a beautiful face. It's a really nice face. But like, yeah, how do you balance that? Because this is your job. You need to post some of the stuff that people want. Yeah. But you also need to, I think that's really interesting advice that your friend gave you of like posting what makes you you. So
I think that's where the brand connections came from, is when I started posting the things that were me, like the cars and stuff. Then I started working with car brands, because they saw like, oh, he's really into cars. Not that I just like cars for an aesthetic purpose.
Right.
I have a deep-seated like emotional connection to cars because my father wanted specific cars and could never have them.
Right.
Like, I'll own those cars very soon because of that, not because I want to be the dude driving a vintage Porsche.
Right.
Because I want people to see me. I want to drive that thing because it's making me feel closer to my father.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a lot of things that are like that with me. I'm not the guy that wants to live in a 5,000 square foot mansion and fucking be like that person at all, you know? But there are certain things I want that are luxurious for my parents because they never had them and they wanted them, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I
It's interesting though, because I think, you know, this is advice that Eva Chen at Instagram gives all the time. It's like, tell more of a story. And I heard somebody say that like, we had a conference and there was this guy talking, he says that like, he likes to document his life, not like curate it, essentially. Mm-hmm. So like, if you're interesting and you have varied interests, like, throw those out there instead of being like, I need to do a photo of coffee and then I need to do a detailed shot of my
mine's
boots.
Not curated like that. I'm terrible at like timelining things.
Right.
I post what I want kind of whenever I want to, and I'm in that same vein, you know, like I want people to see me and be like, oh shit, he is who he is on social media in person. Right. You know, and I think that's another thing, when you meet the brands in person and you are that person, it's a big weight off their shoulders, because you're walking around representing their brand, and if you're this person here but you're totally not there, it creates kind of like, you know, creates a little bit of an issue.
Well, it's just a bit of a letdown, right?
Yeah.
You know, you feel like, oh, okay. You know, I feel a bit like this person isn't what I thought.
I mean, I try to be much more in person than I am across any social media
like
online, you know?
I couldn't throw out the like edgy, you know, motorcycle guy. Yeah. Like if I was throwing that out on Instagram and then people met me, they'd be like, oh no, like that's not.
No, I mean you could though, because if that's part of your personality, I mean if you just all of a sudden showed up here like wearing all leather, I think people would probably be like, the fuck is that?
Right, they'd be like, what club did Nord go to this weekend?
Yeah,
but,
you know. No, I think that, you know, I think being authentic, as that word's used way too much nowadays, but it is really true, is being authentic to you, to the person that you are, across all mediums, whether it's on Instagram or in person, is really, really crucial.
So you know, I'm starting out. Let's say I'm starting out, and I've been doing this for a couple of years, and I'm, you know, I think the people that are trying to grow their following right now, that are at 5, or 10, or 15, or 20, or 30,000 followers, are super scientific about it. Like they talk to me sometimes, and I'm like, oh my god, you are like, you know your shit.
Well,
like,
they've been reading too many blogs about it.
And so like, would your advice be to just like step it back, not worry so much, and try and like just be interesting?
Yeah, I mean that's how I would do it, but obviously there are some people that have made a scientific equation out of it and become successful from it. You know, it's who knows what's going to work for a certain person, but for myself, I'm really big on just being honest with who you are, and I think that's a massive. That's the only way I would do it personally. Right. Now, if someone else does it a different way, like I'm not, you know, castrating them for it, you know, but. As far as my advice, you know, I think I have a lot of people that write me and say that they're trying to grow something, or, you know, they ask for advice, and I always just say, like, post what you're interested in, because there's people out there for everybody. There's an audience out there for everyone.
Right.
You know, I mean, look at some of the reality show stars nowadays. I mean, some of the shows out there are the most boring things ever, but there's millions of people watching them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think everybody's unique in their own way, and it's great if they could, you know, showcase that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I think that like not enough people. Again, you can get stuck in the like semantics of like growth and this and that, and you know, you think about the people that you follow that you really like. It's that you want to create. People forget that, just like you said earlier, that like, I thought this was a really good point where you were like, brands that you like that are doing interesting things are doing them because they're run by interesting people. And you can get to know those people. In the same way as an influencer, if you are interesting and you're projecting a full, interesting life of a lot of different things that
you're
you
going to
are
attract
into.
what you put out.
Right.
I mean, I'm a huge believer in the law of attraction, and some people aren't. Some people think I'm crazy, but
What's that?
you know, the things you think about are the things that become tangible in your life, the things that you're constantly on your mind. If failure is constantly on your mind, you're going to fail. You know, if you're constantly putting out good vibrations and you're like, you know what, I can have that, and you paint this picture in your head of what you want, there's no reason you can't have it. And you know, I've had a lot of ups and downs in my life, even with my professional surfing career. There was times when I was sponsorless, not making any money, and didn't know what the hell I was going to do. And you know, and I was in a very negative space in my head, and it put me in a negative, you know, environment, right? Like a tangible environment. And you know, I think with the life experiences I've been through, I've realized that you really can, you know, physics tells you can alter your environment by the things that you think about, you know, and I believe in that 100%. So I think if you're putting out certain things, you're going to attract what you're putting out. So if you're putting out really good content and, you know, people are, you know, connecting with it, or you're happy with putting it out, good things will happen. You know, I mean, that might have been a little philosophical for Instagram, but
I mean, dude,
I think it's all relatable.
We're Instagram philosophers now. It's fine. It's totally fine. I think you know, for me, to kind of wrap up, you know, is there anything that you think, you know this place decently well, you watch it, like that people aren't doing enough of, and that especially people who are on the up and up, who are trying to grow their following, that they're not doing enough of, that they should do more of?
You know, the one thing that I always say in every meeting that I have, or every conversation that I have when I get into this, is that I think everybody needs to focus on being like they need to focus on, if their social media is taken away, still being effective in whatever column they're trying to put themselves in. Like with myself, I want to get to know these brand people so that they can see that I'm an asset in real life. You know, like in a bar, like if I go into a bar, that I leave with people being like, I want to talk to him more, or I want to get to know more about him. You know what I mean? Because that's how you influence people, is by being interesting and leaving people with a good taste in their mouth. You know, and I think that people are focused so much more on a sheer number than they are on becoming what they're painting themselves to be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so it's like, if the most interesting thing about you is that you have 130,000 followers,
you're screwed.
You're fucked.
Yeah, exactly.
And if those followers go away, you still need to be able to provide value.
Yeah, and that's what I learned with my surfing career. You know, like I had to learn how to be influential with none of this shit. None of this social media was not around when I was on, you know, tour, and I was focusing just on surfing. Like MySpace was coming up, but like that, you know, there was 4 people on MySpace that made money. It's like, you know, I think that's the day and age though, and the younger generation now, they're so fixated on numbers. Like they look at the Kardashians, hundreds of millions of followers, and they think that's it. That's all. That's what you need. Like I need that.
Right.
But some of the most successful people I know don't even have Instagram. You know, some of the most creative, some of the best artists that I know that sell their work for hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know, they don't have Instagram, or some of the best fashion designers that I know. But you know, I think that there's just less focus on real life, and there's more focus on this, you know, digital space where it should be, you know, they should be bridging the gap. Because I think that they create longevity that way, especially with brands.
So what Luke is saying is actually try and be a fucking interesting person. Don't just take pictures of macaroons.
Yeah.
Well,
or, you know, if you're a macaroon chef, that's
unless that's your thing, you know. So Luke, thank you so much. This was incredible. I feel like I need to go out and just like generally be a more interesting, involved person. So thank you, y'all. If you don't follow him, Tim will put up his handle again. You should definitely follow him. If not for the face, for everything else. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Cheers.